I'm going to be talking about June orders. I wish I could tell you that it's going to be up 20%, but occasionally you got to hear some bad news. But even in the bad news, there's still some silver linings. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Pat McGibbon. I'm here to talk about the U.S. Manufacturing Technology Orders Report for June. June orders were at $358 million, down 8% from May. And that's not unusual because June is typically down from May as it represents the beginning of the summer months where we typically see orders down below the average value for the entire year. Now, relative to the first 6 months of 2019 versus the first 6 months of 2018, we're down 13%. And that double-digit negative number is likely to get worse as we get through the rest of the year, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in this video. Regionally, only 2 of the 5 regions saw any growth at all. Northeast region was up by 28% and was driven primarily by increase in orders from the job shop industry, aerospace, and a distant third was the automotive and automotive parts. The second region was the South Central, where new orders from the oil and gas exploration industry, job shop industry, and industrial machinery, primarily food processing equipment, led to a 9% increase relative to where they were in May. Most industries nationally had a really poor month relative to May. Industrial machinery was down 39% from where it was in May. Auto and auto parts was down 35%. And engine and turbines, where power generation comes from, basically down 28%. Only one industry saw any growth in June relative to May, and that was the job shop industry, up 6% relative to May. And one of the key points here I take as a takeaway is that their share of all the orders in June was over 45%. First time I've seen that in ages. And I think it reflects the caution that so many other industries are taking in making new investments in manufacturing technology and putting the burden of producing for them the extra pieces they need, the extra work they need in the job shop industry. In talking to our members about what they're doing to adjust and work with this downturn, there's a couple of interesting tidbits that came out of the information that they shared that you might be interested in hearing about because it might be able to reflect on it and see that you're in good company if it's happening to you. The first one is that while in a typical cycle, good or downturn, a little bit more than half the orders come in the second half of the month. But in the course of the March through June timeframe, 65 to 75% of the orders have been coming in the last 4 days of the month. And I would say most of the people I've talked to said that's what's happening to them. A couple different ideas about why that's happening, but that's not something we'll talk about right here. The second interesting point is that while volumes are lower, there has been pretty steady business. A pretty steady business pattern in the off-shelf products and for the high engineered products that require a great deal of application engineering before they go into the customer's plant floor. But that middle level, the sophisticated machines with simple applications that the customers are going to be able to develop themselves, that has kind of dried up and is coming in drips and drabs and not as steady a part of the order intake as it has been in the last 2 to 3 years. And finally, forming is taking a beating. While they still got really good backlogs for some of the major machines, particularly the presses for the stampings in the automobile industry, they're starting to see some of the fast turn stuff drop to the floor with respect to of orders coming in. Something that should begin to improve according to our friends out in the market by the time we get to August. So going back up to that 13% down for the first 6 months of 2019 versus 2018, here's what I want to share with you. That number is most likely to get a lot worse before it starts getting better. We're still believing in the forecast that we've heard from our analysts that this downturn will be short and shallow, but the shallow may be a little bit deeper than some people would have thought. In this case, we're thinking between 20 and 25% at its worst case. And why? Well, it's not even a forecast. If you do just math, last August, we had an order level of $500 million, and in September, $600 million. That's $1.1 billion in 2 months. That's a little more than 20% of the total for the entire year. If you take a look what happened in the fourth quarter of 2018, the average was $454 million per month. Compare that to the numbers for 2019. The average is $375, and the highest month we've had in 19 so far is $419 million. It's just not likely that as we go through August and September numbers that we are going to be anything less than down 20% relative to the first 9 months of 2018. And that probably will worsen just a bit as we go into December. We're expecting good things for December, looking for things to be better or start to begin to improve in March or April of next year. But we're going to have a pretty deep dive, a little bit more than the word shallow, as we get to the end of 2019. But still, even at 20% down relative to 18, that would yield a 2019 order level. That's one of the best we've had since the Great Recession in 2009. And when I finish up these reports, I always like to try to give a little bit of uplifting news if I can. And the uplifting news comes from our members because they describe the order levels for July as a breath of fresh air. The order levels up significantly from where they were in June and really made coming to work in the summer slump months worthwhile. Doesn't mean that we won't see that double-digit decline increase from 13 to something like 20 by the end of the year. But our analysts that we listen to still are looking at a recovery in 2020. It won't be in the beginning of the year. It'll be probably after the first quarter, maybe even after the second quarter. But by the time we get to the end of 2020, we should see orders beginning to pick up again as we go into 2021. And so that's the good news. And so until next month, when we talk about July orders and we get to hopefully hear confirmation of what we've heard from our members, have a great summer.